panel discussion entitled Advocating for Peace During a Pandemic, the Impact of COVID-19 on Women, Peace and Security in Eastern Europe, South Caucasus, Central Asia, and Africa. The event is being co-organized by the Global Network of Women Peace Builders, Austrian Development Cooperation, the permanent missions of Austria, Georgia, and Moldova to the United Nations. So thank you very much to all of our co-sponsors, and thank you all for joining us for this exciting discussions. As always, we'll be using the chat function or the Q&A function if you want to pose any questions at any point during the discussion. We have a very exciting, very full schedule. So without further ado, I'll hand it over first to our to Global Network of Women Peace Builders, Chief Executive Officer and Founder, Mavic Cabrera-Baleza. Mavic, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Agnieszka. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. And special greetings to our co-organizers, the Permanent Mission of Austria to the United Nations, represented by Mr. Hans Almos Lechner, the Deputy Permanent Representative, the Permanent Mission of Georgia to the United Nations, represented by Ambassador Kaha Imnadze, the Permanent Representative, and the Permanent Mission of Moldova to the United Nations, represented by Mr. Andrei Nikolenko, the First Secretary and Deputy Permanent Representative of the mission. And very special greetings to our women peace builders who have joined us today, and of course, to all of you, our audience members. 1 year ago, I was interviewed for an article by Talif Din on Interpress Service titled Coronavirus Claims Its First UN Casualty. And that casualty was the 64th session of the Commission on the Status of Women. Several hundreds of workshops, panel discussions, and other events were canceled, not to mention flights and hotel reservations. And now here we are, after that huge cancellation. More than 800 meetings and parallel events will take place during these 2 weeks. A big number of them will be organized by civil society. This is a testament to the flexibility and agility of civil society during this pandemic. But more importantly, it is what civil society does on the ground. In local communities directly affected by violent conflicts, at the onset of the pandemic, the Global Network of Women Peace Builders and our civil society members and partners, some of them are on this panel, have immediately taken on the roles of first responders and frontliners. We work together in different countries and communities to distribute relief goods, face masks, hygiene, and sexual and reproductive health products, especially women's reproductive health needs, which, as we know, are often not included in relief packs. We have provided online counseling to women who were victims of or at risk of gender-based violence, which, as we know, has exponentially increased during the lockdowns because of the pandemic. We produced local language radio programs, posters, and posters on how to prevent the spread of the virus, because there's a lot of misinformation and disinformation, and many people still believe that the pandemic is a hoax because their main sources of information are Facebook or TikTok. The strength of civil society response, especially women's rights organization, is in its swiftness and responsiveness to the special needs of women and girls. The pandemic broke out in March 2020, and within less than a month, women and youth peace builders were already conducting relief operations in internally displaced and refugee camps in local communities that are caught between the conflict and the pandemic. And because the efforts are locally led and locally owned, they contributed significantly to reducing vulnerability and built community resilience. All of those were taken on by local women and youth peace builders as they all continued to contribute to implementing peace agreements, advocating for the respect of ceasefire agreements, and advocating with the warring parties who have not yet signed peace agreements to go back to the peace negotiation table. The message was, peace cannot be a victim or a casualty of the pandemic. Along with all of those activities on the ground, and including especially the continuing peace building and conflict prevention work, we also continued our advocacy at the regional and global level. At the regional level, the Global Network of Women Peace Builders convene a series of consultations with civil society that are working for the implementation of the Women, Peace and Security agenda in Africa, in the MENA region, in Central Asia, Eastern Europe, and South Caucasus to discuss how the pandemic response and recovery is or can be integrated into mechanisms like national action plans or local action plans on women, peace, and security. This morning, they will be presenting some of those recommendations, but I just would like to highlight one of them, which is the recommendation to adopt a gender-responsive and conflict-sensitive approach to the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as in the efforts on recovery to address the disproportionate impact on women and young women, in particular those from refugee and internally displaced communities, ethnic minorities, and other marginalized groups. At the global level, we have established a COVID-19 and Women, Peace and Security database, which documents the specific impacts of the pandemic on women and on peace and security and their responses to the crisis. This is a critical tool to promote gender-responsive and conflict-sensitive policymaking and development of COVID-19 response and recovery. We have also successfully advocated for the establishment of the Compact on Women, Peace and Security Action, which is a partnership and coordinating mechanism to ensure financing, monitoring, and accountability for existing policies and commitments on women, peace, and security. I want to emphasize that once again, that in this extraordinary time in our history, we need a bold vision and long-term transformative approaches more than ever. Without a focus on conflict prevention, mediation, and resolution, the impact of the pandemic in conflict-affected settings will be irreversible. Let me end with an appeal to all those listening to us or watching us today, especially policymakers and decision makers. We need you to work with us, civil society, women's rights organizations, because peace, as we've always emphasized, cannot be one of the casualties of this pandemic. And as the Secretary General said in his report to the Security Council during the 20th anniversary of Resolution 1325, at its core, the Women and Peace and Security agenda is a crisis prevention agenda. Thank you, and welcome again to this panel.
Thank you so much, Mavic, for these powerful welcoming words. And indeed, peace cannot wait during the pandemic, and women have to be at the core of the recovery. Without further ado, I'll now pass it over to Ambassador Hans Almoslechner, the Deputy Permanent Representative from the Permanent Mission of Austria to the United Nations. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Agnieszka. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, it is a great pleasure to welcome you on behalf of the Permanent Mission of Austria and the Austrian Development Corporation to this highly relevant side event, Advocating for Peace During a Pandemic. This event has been organized by the Global Network of Women Peace Builders, an important partner of Austria's Development Corporation, and I'm glad that Austria co-sponsors it with our dear colleagues from the Republic of Moldova and Georgia. In the past 20 years since the adoption of Security Council Resolution 1325, one thing has become clear. Peace negotiations and the resolution of conflict are more sustainable, and peace lasts longer when women participate and are fully, equally, and meaningfully engaged in the processes. We need to ensure that women can contribute more effectively to peace and security efforts. Thus, Austria actively works for the implementation of the Women, Peace and Security Agenda internationally through our engagement here in New York, nationally through the implementation of a second National Action Plan, and on a regional level in the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. Through our cooperation with GNWP, we know that participation of women from local civil society generates some of the most important impact in shifting Security Council Resolution 1325 from rhetoric to practice. The development of localization strategies for 1325 ensures that political commitment is translated into meaningful implementation on the ground. We therefore contribute to the work of the Global Network of Women Peace Builders through the Women, Peace and Humanitarian Fund. Women and girls at the local and community level are often worst affected by conflict and their voices least heard. At the same time, local women's organizations are at the front line of efforts to prevent and recover from conflict. We have seen this paradox more clearly than ever during the COVID-19 pandemic. Gender inequality is being exacerbated while women are the first responders. In conflict zones, women organizations were the first to provide essential services on the ground. In this regard, today's side event is so important for us here in New York. We need to listen and learn from the experiences of civil society representatives so that we can translate these resolutions into action. Austria particularly welcomes representatives from women organizations from the Republic of Moldova, Uganda, and Georgia with us today, 3 priority countries for the Austrian Development Cooperation. Austria is ready to continue its efforts to strengthen the Women, Peace and Security Agenda, and in particular, local civil society worldwide to fully live up to their vital role in the realization of Resolution 1325. I'm looking forward to discussing with you what we as international community can do to support ongoing peace processes and women's effective contributions to more sustainable peace and recovery. We have really no time to waste. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador, and thank you to Austria for your commitment in advancing the Women, Peace and Security Agenda and more gender-responsive and conflict-sensitive policies, and your support to our work at the Global Network of Women Peace Builders specifically. I will now hand the floor to Ambassador Kahaim Nadze, the permanent representative of Georgia to the United Nations, to deliver opening remarks. Ambassador Nadze, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Agnieszka. Let me also express at the very outset gratitude to the Global Network of Women Peace Builders for this presentation, this opportunity today, and of course to the Austrian Development Cooperation for their assistance to bring in today this very timely and important matter to report how COVID-19 affects implementation of Women, Peace and Security Agenda in wider region of ours and Eastern Europe, South Caucasus, also Central Asia and Africa. Now, ensuring the meaningful engagement of women in peace processes and promoting issues related to the needs of the women is a very high priority for my government, for the government of Georgia, which is on its turn has envisaged a national action plan for the implementation of the very relevant UN resolution on women, peace and security, which we have adopted. However, and unfortunately, the COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated all the gender inequalities in this regard, and we do face now certain issues in in strengthening women, peace and security agenda. Now, at the same time, the pandemic also demonstrated that the critical role that women played in the response of the COVID-19 efforts. So in this context, the urgency to accelerate the efforts aimed at ensuring women's increased participation in preventing and responding to crisis in peace negotiations and decision-making processes is absolutely evident. We appreciate the work conducted by the GNWP in Georgia, including a series of online trainings for journalists within the regional consultations on COVID-19 and women, peace and security, and launching a media and WPS prize. Now, on our part, the government of Georgia continued to take active measures to mitigate the impact of the pandemic on the rights of various vulnerable groups, including women, by providing support, including financial one, to ease the impact of the consequences of the pandemic. The government also paid significant attention to reducing the risks and impacts of the violence against women and domestic violence. Throughout the pandemic, the state continuously provided a full range of free services for the victims of the violence against women and the domestic violence. Today's important discussion will solicit, hopefully, political support for gender responsive and conflict sensitive COVID-19 response and recovery, which is important, from all key actors, including the United Nations, member states, civil society, and other major stakeholders. And we're very much looking forward to hearing today the local women peace builders who will share their experience, good practices, and lessons learned from advancing advocacy for gender responsive peace building and the implementation of women, peace and security agenda during the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, I thank you. I'll stop at that. And I wish the organizers and the participants very productive and successful discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. Thank you for these words, and thank you to Georgia also for your continuing commitment, like you said, to the implementation of women, peace and security through now the third National Action Plan, and the commitment to engage and collaborate with the civil society on the implementation of these plans. As we all know, this is really the critical component of effective implementation. So we've really appreciated the collaboration and partnership of the government of Georgia throughout these years of engaging and working with you and our partners in Georgia. I'll now pass the floor to the Ambassador Andrei Nikolenko, the first Secretary and Deputy Permanent Representative of the Permanent Mission of the Republic of Moldova to the UN. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. Ms. Moderator, ladies and gentlemen, at the outset, I would like to welcome you all at this side event and to express my appreciation for your virtual attendance at this timely discussion regarding the challenges and constraints in the process of the implementation of women, peace and security agenda during the COVID-19 pandemic in our regions. Allow me also to thank the global network of Women Peace Builder for inviting the Permanent Mission of the Republic of Moldova to co-sponsor and to be part of this cross-regional event. Last year, we marked the 20th anniversary of the adoption of groundbreaking UN Security Council Resolution 1325 on women, peace and security, and the 20th anniversary of the adoption of the Beijing Platform for Action. Both of these speak to the importance of women's leadership and participation in peace and security processes, and of the necessity to take the gendered impacts of armed conflict and violence fully into account. They also underline the need to understand gender inequality, the exclusion of women, and human rights violation as root causes and drivers of conflict and fragility. The consequences of COVID-19 have shown that the Women, Peace and Security agenda is central to addressing the need for women's inclusion and leadership and the increasing threat of violence against women and girls. Ms. Moderator, in this unprecedented time, the Republic of Moldova remains fully committed to the promotion, protection, and fulfillment of all human rights, and to the full and effective implementation of the Beijing Platform for Action and the Program of Action for the International Conference on Population and Development and the outcomes of their review conference. For the Republic of Moldova, women, peace and security is a relatively new concept, which has only started to be gradually incorporated into normative language in recent years. This process started properly by adoption and application of the National Program for the Implementation of Resolution 1325 for the period 2018-2021. The outcome of this exercise is to identify the barriers to the participation of women in peace and security and set up measures to address them. Essentially, what we are trying to achieve in this process is to translate the informal power of women in society into a formal power that allows them to be vocal and proactive in matters of national security. At this stage, we cannot come with any particularly groundbreaking statistical data to show the level of women's participation in the security sector. However, it is worth noting that we achieved the 20% minimum quota of women's participation in peacekeeping operation by creating a feasible environment for women to advance within the army and security sector and giving them the opportunity to be deployed. Also, process is made in increasing the number of women servicing in the police and law enforcement agency. This is on the foundation of a critical mass of women with a strong background in peace and security that we hope we will be able to achieve in a foreseeable future. Ms. Moderator, we all countries together have not yet delivered sufficiently on the unanimous commitment we made in 2000 to implement the Women, Peace and Security agenda in full. But to achieve this, we do not necessarily need new resolutions, but to act upon our promises. The Republic of Moldova will not deviate from the goal of keeping its promises, and we are determined to spare any efforts in ensuring that Women, Peace and Security agenda is implemented now. And when we will mark the 20th anniversary of the resolution 1325, we will be able to deliver tangible results. In conclusion, Ms. Moderator, we are open to continue our partnership with civil society in other countries in this area by sharing the experience regarding the mitigation measures in fighting COVID-19 impacts on women, peace and security. And I wish to all of us a fruitful discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador, and thank you for recognizing and highlighting some of the challenges that the pandemic has created for the implementation of the Women, Peace and Security agenda, and for the Republic of Moldova's commitment to continue advancing the agenda despite those challenges, and to working with women, civil society to find ways to address and overcome these barriers. We will now move to the panel discussion with our three wonderful panelists, Valentina Bodruk, the president of Gender Centru in Moldova, and gender experts with the vast experience. Goret Komurembe, the director of programs from the Coalition for Action 1325 in Uganda, and likewise one of the experts involved in the pioneering and advancing localization of women, peace and security agenda in Uganda, and Elena Rutzetskaya, the director of Women's Information Center in Georgia, and Women, Peace and Security, Women's Rights and Peace Building experts, again with a wealth of expertise. I will not read the detailed bios of our speakers, but they will be posted in the chat, so you'll have access to them to see the breadth of their experience. But it is a great pleasure to have you with us today. I worked with all three of our panelists in advancing women, peace and security implementation, advancing localization in the three countries we are featuring today on the panel. And it is really a privilege to have you here to share your experiences and insights. Before I hand it over to Valentina, to our first speaker, let me just give a little bit of a background. And before doing that, let me just appreciate that I see there is a lot of exchanges in the chat. Thank you for this, and please continue the exchanges. Please continue sharing your thoughts, your perspectives. Please feel free to to share also your thoughts on the issues that the panels will be commenting on. We want to hear you from we want to hear from you as well. We want it to be an interactive discussion. Please also remember there is the Q&A function. Do not wait to pose your questions, to ask your questions until the end of the presentations. Feel free to pose the questions as we go, and my colleagues will collate them and will ask them to the panelists at the end of the discussion. If you want to take the floor during the question and answer session, you can raise your hand, and time allowing, we might give you the floor. But if there is too many people wanting to take the floor, we might not have time to give the floor to everyone. So to make sure, maybe post your question in the Q&A window as well. As Mavic has mentioned at the outset of this, or at the very beginning, this event builds on the series of consultations, regional consultations, that the Global Network of Women Peace Builders, with support from the Austrian Development Cooperation, has held virtually across several regions, including the Eastern Europe, South Caucasus, and Central Asia. We had some colleagues from Central Asia in that consultation region, as well as the Africa region, where we had participants from Western, Eastern, Central, and Southern Africa. The consultations have provided really sharp and unique insights into the way the pandemic has impacted women, peace, and security, has impacted peace, and has impacted the implementation of the agenda, the way it has impacted gender equality as well. We have gleaned through those consultations what we already knew was true, which is that unfortunately it has made it more difficult, as some of our opening speakers have shared, to implement women, peace, and security. It has meant that sometimes the agenda has been deprioritized, has been pushed to the second plan, or to the back burner. At the same time, what was also really apparent from the consultations is that women, peace, and security agenda offers a unique framework, offers a unique tool to address some of the challenges that are created by the pandemic. We have seen this time and over again in our work as the Global Network of Women Peace Builders, when we implement the localization of women, peace, and security agenda, which we have done with our dear partners who are here with us today, across these 3 countries and in 13 more, that this leads not only to better implementation of the women, peace, and security resolutions, but more broadly to more gender responsive and conflict sensitive local governance. And so in the face of COVID, and I know Goret and others will speak more about this, this work can lead to more gender responsive and conflict sensitive response to COVID and recovery from it. Response and recovery that meaningfully address and take into account the needs and priorities of women, and then meaningfully include them in decision making. So I am very glad to have these 3 experts on the panel with us today to share some more insights into how exactly COVID-19 has impacted the implementation of women, peace, and security, but also how women, peace, and security and work towards its implementation can be leveraged as a way to address this pandemic in a way that's sustainable, in a way that's gender responsive and conflict sensitive. So with this, I will now pass over to Valentina Bodrup. Like I said, Valentina is the president of Gender Centru in Moldova, the lead organization leading the coalition for the implementation of women, peace, and security in the country, and our dear partner and friend for many years. So Valentina, during our consultation on the impact of COVID-19 on women, peace, and security in the region, organized in September 2021, you have shared the impacts of COVID-19 on the implementation of the Moldovan National Action Plan on women, peace, and security, and the agenda more broadly on the work of women-led organizations. Could you, what do you think are the most significant of these impacts, the most significant impacts of COVID-19 on women, peace and security implementations and on women-led peace activism more broadly in Moldova? Over to you, Valentina. And you'll have to unmute yourself. Valentina, I don't know if you're speaking. In fact, I think we may have lost Valentina. She did mention she was having some internet issues, so I hope she will be back with us very, very shortly. And in the meantime, I'll then pass on to Goretti Komurembe from the Coalition of Action 1325 in Uganda. Goretti, like I said, Goretti and the Coalition for Action have, in collaboration with GNWP and with support from Austria Development Cooperation, pioneered the localization of women, peace and security agenda in Uganda, including holding localization workshops during and despite the pandemic. So, Goretti, how have women been contributing to gender responsive and conflict sensitive COVID-19 response and recovery in Uganda? And thinking specifically of the experience of localization of women, peace and security in Luero that you conducted in partnership with GNWP and with support from Austria Development Cooperation, what do you think is the value of localization in supporting such women-led responses to COVID and ensuring a gender-responsive and conflict-sensitive recovery? Goretti, over to you. The mic is yours.
Thank you, Agnieszka, and thank you, GNWP and other partners for organizing this important meeting. Goretti from Uganda, Coalition for Action 1325, we are glad to participate in this meeting. Regarding your question, Agnieszka, what are the women of Uganda and indeed in the region doing to contribute to the gender responsive and conflict sensitive COVID-19 response and recovery is that women in Africa and indeed in Uganda have been at the forefront in raising awareness on the pandemic. Because as Mavic said in her remarks, the awareness is very low and some people think that COVID-19 does not exist, it's a hoax. So we took it up as Coalition for Action and launched an awareness campaign supported by the Global Network of Women Peace Builders and the Austrian Development Agency. So we went on radio, we educated the communities on how COVID-19 spreads and how it can be prevented. And we used the different methodologies, including IEC materials, including community outreaches, and very, very important during 16 days of activism. We reached out to communities physically, especially in those in slum areas that have been hardly hit by this pandemic, and we gave out relief items, including food, soap, hand washing equipment, in addition to educating them about COVID-19 and how they shared a lot of things and how they were coping up. And we also mentioned that one of the other things that women organizations are doing in Uganda in regard to responding to COVID-19 is conducting research, to bring to get the data in order to influence the response. I will mention that some of the women organizations that have done the research here, we have the Women's International Peace Center, the Center for Women Governance, and of course with others. And these are also members of GNWP. So what was very, very significant from their researches was that it brought out, the limited participation of women on COVID-19 task forces, which became an advocacy issue for all of us, all the women working in Uganda. We started engaging the leadership, the national task force, the district leadership to involve women on the COVID-19 task forces so that the issues the response can be gendered and can respond to the issues of women and the girls. And I'm happy to mention that COVID-19 has made majority of women more enterprising and more resilient than before. And what do I mean here? Women have learned that that the pandemics, including GBV, they need to be more creative. They are involved in making face masks and selling out, and also giving to their organizations and their groups. They are training women in making liquid soap, making hygiene kits that they are distributing to vulnerable communities and the girls and the women. So we also have women that are engaged in backyard gardening, whereby they are growing their own food. Because for us, for example, in Uganda, when the lockdown happened, it was, the president mentioned 2 weeks. 2 weeks became other 2 weeks. It became 3 months, 3 months, 3 months. So women have, come to know that they don't need to depend on the market. So those who are in urban areas have learned to grow their own food on a very small piece of land, so that they can have some food security. They don't need to buy everything, because we really faced it tough when the lockdown was imposed, and which continued for a long time. Again, women-led organizations have maintained their toll-free helplines. Yeah? These organizations' helplines used to operate like from morning to evening, but because of the COVID and the need for the services, the services were extended to, working from Monday to Sunday and 24 hour. It became 24 hour, and these women are providing legal aid services, the online counseling and referrals, especially to those who are suffering from violence, any form of violence. We've had youth groups coming up also to make a contribution to gender responsive COVID-19 recovery. They are engaged, some have formed saving groups. Yeah, this has been common with the women. Yeah, women have been engaged in saving, in saving and borrowing in those groups. But now the youth have also learned that they needed to start such kind of initiatives where they save money and lend to each other and start small businesses that can help them, survive in this hard economy. I must mention that despite the being enterprising and all that, women still, face a lot of challenges. Here, for example, in Uganda, women, majority are in the informal sector, about 90%. And you find what they're earning is little, but the transport costs are very high. So you find that most women cannot move to urban centers where they sell their goods because of high transport costs, because the transport companies are operating at half capacity. We've had a lot of women who are on the front line as healthcare workers, and I think this one cuts across. And Coalition for Action has also been at the forefront in training women in leadership, so that they are able to take on leadership positions, but also we train women in mediation to be able to make it to the peace committees in the districts where we work. Now, in regard to what we do, we have observed that localization adds value in supporting women-led response to COVID-19 and ensuring gender-responsive and conflict-sensitive recovery. For instance, with support from GNWP and the Austrian Development Agency, we have implemented localization in Ruwero district. And during the process, we observed that, of course, we take them through what is the Women, Peace and Security Agenda, the Resolution 1325, the pillars, participation, and etc. So as we go through the process of identifying the conflict issues and prioritizing them, we find that localization empowers the women to speak out, or on the issues. And when the districts want to prioritize other issues other than what is affecting them, especially like GBV, women say no. This is the issue that is affecting women, and we have just been educated about 1325 and how it emphasizes participation of women. So they really come out to speak their issues, and when it comes to electing the task force that drafts the local action plan, women come up and they don't want to be marginalized any longer, because they make reference that we've just learned about 1325 and now you want to take up all the positions on the task force. They say, no, we need women also to be on the task force. And again, on localization, it has enabled the district local government to appreciate women's participation in decision making by electing them on the task force, as I said. But they really fought so hard. And for Luwero, we have women. We have 5 women on the task force out of 9 members. With localization, also we've had the women organizations. For example, one of our partners, Luwero Women Development Association, being at the forefront in lobbying the district to appreciate the agenda. I remember when we were having initial meetings, Luwoda, the Luwero Women Development Association was at the forefront in lobbying the government to allow the project, and then they were able to sign the MOU with the Luwoda and COACT.
Thank you so much, Goretti. Thank you for these really inspiring examples, and especially for highlighting the innovation and resilience of women. And it is indeed a very difficult time, and I'm sure that resonates across many different countries where we were unable to plan. We didn't know for how long is this pandemic going to last? How long are these lockdown measures going to last? So that really requires innovation and adaptability, and that really shows the power of women peace builders and women's organizing. And thank you also for really so clearly showcasing the value of localization in bringing women to these critical decision-making spaces, including the COVID-19 task forces. I think we have Valentina back with us now. So Valentina, I'll turn back to you. And before your connection dropped, I was just asking you to expand on something you shared during our regional consultation back in September. You spoke about how COVID has impacted the implementation of women's security, peace and security agenda and the national action plan, but also more broadly how it has affected women's organizations and women-led peace work. So I was wondering whether you could expand on this and share your experiences on that from Moldova. And I know Valentina has a few slides to illustrate her presentation, so I'll ask my colleague Weven to put them on, but Valentina, you can already start your presentation in the meantime.
Thank you, Agnieszka. Thank you very much to all. It's a challenge with internet connection, but we are very strong in order to implement all our ideas. And today, thank you very much. I will present the voice of my colleagues from civil society who work very hard to promote gender equality in Moldova. The next, please. I represent Gender Center, but also I represent Platform for Gender Equality, and also I am Moldova State University professor. And I would like to mention some points very important on our experience and the context of impact of COVID-19 on women, peace and security agenda implementation. My colleagues mentioned many points. Of course, we have a different experience, but we have some common points in order to stress our attention or our governance, our civil society colleagues, and our partners for development. Republic of Moldova, as mentioned, our ambassador excellencies, in 2018, the National Program on Implementation of Resolution 3025 on Women, Peace and Security and National Action Plan regarding the implementation of the programs were adopted. Different ministry now implementing the institutions plan. The working coordination group was established, and I'd like to mention special the partnership platform was created, which state structure participation and NGO representatives. Next, please. Also, we should mention some good practices. I insist on this because it's not easy in pandemic context to explore the good practices, but we need to extend our practices. And one of the good practices in Moldova was localization of women's peace and security agenda. We organized many trainings in different in the region, especially in Cahul and Belz, which focus on capacity building of local authority and multi-sectoral specialists. And thanks to our colleagues from Global Network of Women Peace Building and other support, and our regional program. Inclusion of women's peace and security subject into training programs in educational institution and security sector. Address the issues of personal and social security in connection of gender-based violence and gender equality. Cooperation between civil society, especially based on platform for gender equality, and cooperation of central and local public authority. Also, I would like to mention special experience, wonderful experience of regional cooperation with Georgia, Ukraine, and also with support of other support and in cooperation with women in Moldova. Next, please. But we understand that there are many challenges in Moldova at the moment on NAP implementation, connected with gender stereotypes, but also with local socioeconomic factors. The national program at the moment not covers the Transnistrian region. Other, this program is not connected with concept of human security. And at the moment, is no coordination mechanism of women peace and security agenda implementation. And it's a big challenge for NAP implementation in Moldova. But the main challenge remains COVID pandemic situation. The cases increase every day. We're a small country and COVID affected a lot our population, women and men, but specifically women. The next, please. We should mention that based on gender assessment realized by UN Women in Moldova, Gender Center, and Global Network of Women Peace Building, which other support, and other NGO, we state strong restriction in the Transnistrian region, limited population mobility and access to services, especially of victims of domestic violence. Humanitarian aid have been delayed due to the bureaucratic rules. Population registration is affected. Children born during the pandemic situation in the Transnistrian region could not be registered in the national register. Women are not present in the negotiation process. Even if some women are present in some groups, very few number. Women's needs are not sufficiently included in the negotiation agenda. Next, please. Also, we should mention that based on our assessment, COVID-19 pandemic situation worsened inequality related to shared the care responsibilities. Women will keep being involved in the household work and require more time for domestic work and more effort. The care crisis affected households, especially with children. Elderly women are the most marginalized and excluded in this process, and care responsibility will isolate women even more. And also, during the more time, the closure of educational institution overloaded the parents, but especially women. The next slide, please. Of course, we need mention more and more. But what is important? To thinking in the future. And our recommendation of civil society are focused on the following: reinforce the coordination mechanism on the Women's Peace and Security Agenda implementation. We propose that coordination mechanism should be part of national machinery on gender equality. Also, Moldova will start to elaborate the second national action plan. And the new action plan should cover Transnistrian region and should be connected with concept of human security. And special focus we need to NEP localization process and continuously support of cooperation of civil society efforts from both banks of Dnistru River in order to ensure gender needs and inclusiveness of population. Next, please. And finally, I would like to mention that only in our common effort of all our actors, we can ensure efficient implementation of women, peace and security agenda in our country, in our region. Thank you for your attention, but special thanks to all our partners. Thanks for continuously support for our effort. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Valentina, and particularly for bringing the focus to human security. I recall this was really a very strong recommendation throughout our regional consultations, but in particular in the one conducted in Eastern Europe, South Caucasus, and Central Asia, that the pandemic has really illustrated how important the holistic approach to peace and security implementation and the inclusion of this human security lens is for the implementation of the agenda and for the sustainable peace. And indeed, we have discussed and are continuing to discuss how localization, like you said as well, can be a tool through which that perspective is really very strongly brought in. So thank you so much for highlighting that, but also highlighting some of the challenges that the pandemic has brought to the implementation of peace and security and peace or gender inclusive peace more broadly. I'll now move on to Elena Rutzetskaya, head of the Women's Information Center in Georgia, and once again a formidable peace builder and activist with many years of experience. Elena's advocacy has contributed to the adoption of the Georgia's first National Action Plan on Women, Peace and Security, and then, of course, second and third as well. And we've been very fortunate to partner with Elena and Women's Information Center for effective implementation of this agenda, including, especially last year, like Mavic mentioned, because to target some of the disinformation and misinformation through the work with the media. So Elena, with the support from Austrian Development Corporation, Women's Information Center and GNWP, we conducted a training with journalists online virtually in April 2020, at the very outset, at the very start of the pandemic. So have you seen any impact or positive results of this work with the media? And more broadly, what do you think is the role of the media in promoting gender responsive and conflict sensitive response to COVID-19 and supporting women in their peace building work more broadly? Over to you, Elena, and thank you for being with us.
Thank you, Agnieszka. I'm proud of our organization, member of GNWP. First of all, many thanks to the event organizers and sponsors for this effort, because I'm glad that despite the COVID pandemic, it has still become possible to conduct this side event and such an important issue as WP is. As for your question, as you know, there is not a large cycle of journalists who are directly interested in the topic related to the WPC agenda. Nevertheless, our organization we're able to identify and involve these people, these journalists, in the project project that we are implementing with the support of GNWP and Austria Development Agency. About this project, already mentioned our ambassador Gaha Imnadze. Often civil society representatives and peace builders have more information about specific cases, specific women cases than a journalist, because our organization and my colleagues, peace builders, every day work with IDP and conflict affected population. And during the COVID pandemic, we every day work with group conflict affected women. Despite of bad communication, we use different channels. We use online channels, face-to-face. We use young generation for communication with women, etc. It is important to build bridges between journalists and women peacemakers to advocate for specific cases and community issues, because we have information, civil society organization, and we should share with stakeholders, journalists, and again. The format of the training presented first is the importance of journalist awareness of WPC issue. Secondly, the importance of gender-sensitive approach to media coverage. And thirdly, the important role of journalists in advocating for specific cases, specific women cases and community issues. The media advocacy of one of the key issues for support to IDP and conflict-affected women and their family. It's very important that we see problems on the part of journalists as well. The challenges the journalists themselves face when covering WPC issues. That is why we continue to work together and work to create new communication spaces between journalists and decision makers, between journalists and representatives of the person who involved in negotiation process, between journalists and women peacemakers, and journalists and between journalists and IDP and conflict affected women, and more. In the peace women in general and WPC issue are still not properly relevant in the society. It's not popular, especially in the light of the COVID pandemic and the several socio-economical problems of the society. The role of journalists is therefore even more important in promoting the work of women peace builders and in raising the issue of peace and making it interesting to the public in general. The Women's Information Center also carried out a project, a small project with support of, this is other project, we support the Austria Development Agency. We carry out this project in a place near the administrative bordering lies. The place name is Chorchana, where women and their family live in a fear every day due to creeping occupation and borderization by Russia. We were able to empower Chorchana women and involve them in various project activities, including other projects. These women just recently did not and could not give interview to journalists at all. However, today they are stronger and have more confidence. Moreover, women from Chorchana have been involved in the WPC localization process and are collaborating with municipalities to advocate for the needs of their community in the framework of our project with GNWP. Popularizing the story of more successful women is an importantly to do more good deeds. Our organization believes, and this is the our slogan of Women's Information Center, that women can, women act, and women change. Thank you very much. If you have question, I answer this question. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Elena, and especially for this concluding strong works on women care and women act, and women indeed make a difference. And thank you also for highlighting that journalists need the skills and and capacity and awareness in order to be able to cover the issues of women, peace and security. But they do also face challenges. So they do need support as well in terms of their own protection, in terms of their access to be able to cover these issues. And for highlighting the links that you're making by bringing together journalists and women peace builders, I think this is a critical part of these approaches, bringing journalists together with women peace builders, with women mediators, creating these networks across the two worlds and providing opportunities for exchange and sharing and building relationships beyond just a training or just writing or research for a single article. So we could not be prouder of this partnership with the Women's Information Center, and thank you again for sharing this. I will remind everyone and to please ask your questions in the Q&A segment. We do already have a few questions, so I'll summarize this first round of questions to our speakers now, give back the floor to them to share their thoughts. But in the meantime, please post any additional questions you might have. Elena, Valentina, and Goretti. The first few questions we received, a lot of them focus around how to address the gendered impacts of the pandemic. So we have a question around what is your approach in preventing and protecting women during the pandemic from the domestic violence? A related question that was addressed to Goretti, but if anyone else would like to address it, please feel free as well. A related question on how to address the impact of COVID-19 on young women and girls, especially during school closures, where they might be more exposed to sexual violence, to abuse, and to early and child marriage. This is a question coming from Mozambique. Another question: how to support mothers? And Valentina, you talked about it, right? The burden of care that mothers are disproportionately carrying, but also a lack of access to maternal health care. So how to protect mothers, both those that are carrying their children need maternal care and those who are taking the disproportionate additional burden of parenting during the pandemic. So these three questions about how to support these different women, any good practices from your organizations, and then finally one question from Nadia from Georgia, re-emphasizing once again what you all said as well, that the COVID has caused deprioritization of the implementation of women, peace and security agenda and channeling of the funds away from civil society organizations that work towards it. So what would be your concrete recommendations, actions that you would recommend to your government to take to recommit and reinforce the prioritization of women, peace and security and the meaningful participation of women in peace processes? So responding to violence against women, responding to violence and threats faced specifically by young women and girls, supporting mothers, and concrete recommendations for reprioritization of the agenda. I'll open the floor, and whichever of you would like to speak, please take the floor and respond.
Okay, I can.
Go ahead, Elena.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much for your questions, because the participants emphasize very important and key issues. Yes, and first of all of us know about the violence against women, and domestic violence issue was one of the crucial issue during the pandemic period and lockdown period. Yes, and we know the fact that number of cases increase, and of course for us was very indicator this, because women call in the phone and write messenger us and personally, and we see real problem, and because we start think our organization how we react, and we start the informed population about services, and one of the crucial services and important services in Georgia exist hotline and SOS application. Ministry of Internal Affairs creates this application when the woman can click in the SOS and the police identify these women and help them. And because our approach was informed population, and we start to cooperation with the ministry and ask them to disseminate information through mobile phone, and the ministry informed population through languages, Georgian, Russian, Georgian, Azeri, and Armenian languages, because you know we have many ethnic groups in Georgia, informed and instructor how to use this. Without this, we use our experience communication with local government and localization process of gender political localization and 3025 localization, and we use local government for disseminate information about services. And also we use active use young generation, because young generation have, during the pandemic especially, we see they have access to ICT technology and in general techniques in technology, computers, but unfortunately women in rural have no information, and we use youth generation as bridge and informed women about services. In the framework, our activities, we provide legal and psychological services women, and also create new platform. It's very important platform. This is solidarity platform between representative different sphere, culture, civil society, government, and especially important for us, we include in this process religion leaders, and also women, victim women, because women who have violence during this pandemic period participate in this process not as victims, but they participate as experts who know this issue. And we platform for discussion and platform for discuss how to react. Then concern young generation and early marriage situation. We have know exactly how situation, how statistic, but when I communicate with the conflict zone, this is one of region, Gali, my colleagues say me about the race statistic, early marriage, and I think this is also indicator for thinking and make more research. Then concern mother and other group, we not divided because we work with the all groups, and we know pregnant women have specific problems, and single mothers and mothers who have many children, they have specific cases, and our help to specific cooperation between victims and concrete women with concrete actors, stakeholders, central, local government, and maybe civil society organization.
Can I contribute?
Of course, Valentina, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Agnieszka. Thank you, Elena. I think we have a more common experience in this context, but especially I would like to mention that in Moldova, the first step was cooperation, very strong cooperation between different organizations of civil society from different domains. Especially, I would like to mention our mobilization of National Coalition, Life Free of Violence in the Family, and Platform for Gender Equality. Thanks to support of our partners for development, we have an opportunity to restructure our fundings and to help offer direct help to our women with hygienical packets, with food packets, and especially with very important information, especially at rural level, as mentioned Elena too. But it's important that exactly in Moldova, we push government to have a concrete and open dialogue on this, how to help our population, especially women at rural area, older women with children, and other category. And in this context, I would like to mention exactly we have the same national hotline supported by government and by our partners for development. But regarding the family situation, you know, it was limited access to services. In this case, we proposed different online psychological support centers and services, but also different social apartment in order that some shelters were closed during the pandemic lockdown. but we propose civil society special social apartment for our victims of domestic violence. Other issue to help family. We discuss a lot and we have a very good project implemented, which UN Women Support and other our partners, to provide best practices on gender sensitive father models, to support men, be friendly, to be friendly and gender sensitive, but also we focus our attention and our project to eliminate gender stereotype, to eliminate toxic masculinity that affect a lot our society. We can discuss many issues, but I think our platform today, it's very good opportunity to sharing experience, and I think we have another colleague who can present other experience. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Goretti, would you like to add anything to these responses? And specifically on the question of young girls and addressing the increased risk of child marriage, which was directed specifically to you.
Wow. Agnieszka, thank you. But I wanted to add something small on how we are addressing domestic violence.
Perfect.
We have a National Coalition for Domestic Violence Act. In Uganda, we have that law, the Domestic Violence Act, and women organizations working on these issues, we are in that coalition. And each organization where you work, the region where you work, you are the ear, you are the eye on what is happening in that region. And we bring all these issues to the coalition, and the coalition has the legal practitioners, has the psychosocial support organization. So we offer comprehensive support to these victims, including representing them in courts of law. So that one is working for us. We have another approach of community barazas, whereby we go to communities and discuss these issues, and women and the girls who have been victims, they open up and say, my case was my file got messed up by an officer in that office, and the leaders are able to really act and respond. Of course, we have localization. We do popularize the national laws on domestic violence and all that. So let me go specific. Also, regarding deprioritizing the issue of women, peace and security in Uganda, in the face of COVID, we were in the middle of developing our National Action Plan 3. But when COVID set in, the process became slow, and we were supposed to launch it in May last year. We couldn't launch it, yet we had already validated it. Only to be launched this month of the Women's Month during the International Women's Day. So it slowed down the process, but again, COVID was on top of things. Funding reduced for the work that we do on fixed bill there. Then on the issue of how do we manage the young girls that have in the face of COVID? Yeah, we've had a challenge in Uganda, especially with the women and girls falling victim, bearing the brunt of COVID-19. We've had, for example, in one district, I've documented this data. We've had about between April and December 2020, we've gotten data that 1,560 girls got pregnant. Yeah, and this is one district. I don't know how you call it. Is it a division there? So these many girls got pregnant, and of course we assume there are more than this, because this data was gotten from the health centers where they went for antenatal services. But how about those who didn't go? So it has affected the young girls, and teenage pregnancies are in the moon. We've had cases where girls are now delivering in their examination rooms. 6 girls in the recent newspaper here in Uganda. So it's really an issue. And our organizations, Coalition for Action, it's a coalition of other women organizations, about 45. So we are tasking we are working in partnership with our women organization at the grassroots to offer support to the women, to the girls that have fallen victim to especially teenage pregnancies. We've had children that have become unruly, including the boys, young boys. They want to beat up their parents, they want to beat up their mothers. But our coalition members are working around the clock to ensure that whoever needs psychosocial support, he or she is attended to. And girls, we are running a campaign to allow all these girls go back to school. We are reaching out to parents not to really force these girls who are fallen victim to go and get married. So, and we are happy that girls, those who are in candidate classes, some have come out to sit for their exams. Thank you, Agnieszka.
Thank you so much, Goretti, and thank you for ending on this inspiring note as well. The young women's and girls' education is so critical. I will give the floor to Mavic, who also has a response to some of the questions that were posed. And while I do that, I just want to share with the three panelists 2 additional questions that have come in so that you can reflect, and I'll get back to you after Mavic's intervention. And these are really, I think we'll combine the second round of responses with your sort of closing remarks, because these are really 2 questions that are looking forward and looking at the systemic changes. So one of the questions is exactly this: how do you envisage systemic changes, structural changes that are needed to build back better, safer, more inclusive societies, so that in the future the women, peace and security agenda is not surprised or pushed away, that we don't, that we're prepared for future crises and pandemics, because we know we might expect those. And the second, maybe related question, I'll pose the two to you together and let you decide how you address them. The second question is around how can we advocate, how do you advocate, and some of you touched on this already, for the recognition that sexual and reproductive health and rights of women and girls are a right and are a basic humanitarian need, especially in crisis, so that again they are not being deprioritized when there is a health or humanitarian crisis. So I'll leave you with these 2 questions and pass the floor on to Mavic, and then I'll return back to our panel. Mavic, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Agnieszka. I would like to respond to the question posed by Eliane Monizero. And her question is how to set up mechanisms for women's rights organizations to regroup in support of their continuing important work during this pandemic. We who are participating in this Zoom meeting are fortunate to be able to do that, because we have access to the technologies. A large part of local populations do not have this privilege. In conflict-affected and fragile states, the statistics is that only 19% of their population are able to access the internet. And within that digital divide, there is a gender gap, meaning much fewer women are able to access the internet, are able to use smartphones and computers. So they have less access to information, critical, life-saving information than anyone else. So what to do in this situation? We need to be innovative and resourceful. And you've demonstrated that. Many women's organizations, especially community-based women's rights and civil society groups, have already demonstrated that. They use a hybrid solution. So they use the technology, simple mobile phone, not the smartphones. They use the technologies, texting, when it is available. And in some communities, in-person meetings are still allowed in small groups, 5, 7 people, and strictly observing public health guidelines, face masks, face shields, and hygiene, strict hygiene practices. I see COAC does that a lot, right? In small in-person meeting, but strictly observing public health guidelines. And also in many countries, including the Philippines, and we have some participants from the Philippines here. So small in-person meeting combined with the technology when it's available, and the use of community radio. We also see this becoming more popular again, because community radio is the most affordable and accessible medium, and it uses local languages. So they're very effective in local communities. But I should also stress that to be able to do this hybrid solution, we need flexible financial support. And we are very grateful to the Austrian Development Cooperation for allowing us to do that. That while they realize we are working on a project, the whole perspective of our work in women, peace, and security is not a project. Peace building must be part of our lifestyle and global culture, because we cannot projectize, we cannot compartmentalize in mandates the lives of women. It is one whole continuum. So we need that flexibility to be able to do that. And I have two calls to our member states partners. We have especially the donors. Please continue to make flexible funding available, and if possible, core support for women's rights organizations to approach the response and recovery from the pandemic in an integrative and intersectional manner. Second, for the member states to work with telecommunication companies to make safe, culturally sensitive, gender sensitive technology to be available. And we've seen some countries that have done this partially. For example, in South Africa, the government has entered into a negotiation with some telecom companies to make information available for free. You don't have to use data on your phone. You don't have to have, expensive internet access. So it is possible when there is political will. And then finally, on building back better and building back equal, put women in decision-making positions in the response and recovery to the pandemic, while continuing to support their participation in decision-making on matters of peace and security. Thank you.
Thank you, Mavic, for these comprehensive responses, and especially highlighting the challenge posed by the digital divide, the gendered digital divide, but also the innovation. And this highlights what Goretti was also saying, the resilience and innovation that women peace builders have shown in face of this as well. And I just want to mention that GNWP is currently conducting research on the impact of digitalization and the progress of the use of information communication technologies that we've seen over the past years, but especially accelerated during the pandemic. So the impact of this on women's meaningful participation, peace negotiations, peace processes, and peace building more broadly. So please stay tuned. We might be in touch with some of you to consult and include you in the research, and we'll definitely be in touch to disseminate the research findings and recommendations. But now I want to get back to our panel with the two questions, the really forward-looking questions of what are the systemic structural changes that are needed to be better prepared to make sure that women, peace and security and gender equality are part of our bloodstream. And more specifically, if you have any thoughts or recommendations related to ensuring that sexual and reproductive health and rights are seen as an essential need and right that they are. And because we're nearing the end of our time, I'll ask you to use this response to also be your concluding words. So anything else that you would like to convey, any final recommendations, this is your space for it now, and I'll ask you to keep it to around 2 minutes, 1 to 2 minutes. and I should call on someone. So let's start with Elena, and we'll go in the reverse order than we went in the first round.
Thank you very much. Then concern systematically changes. I think it's our role of stakeholders and civil society organization. I think it is important to continue the VPS localization processes in the new reality and the COVID impact reality. And it's very important during the localization process on gender politics localization process and VPS, WPS localization process. It's very important to have more information in the municipality level, gender statistics, research of needs of particularly vulnerable groups so that municipalities can ensure access to basic services. Yes, Mavic already mentioned about the communication problems and in generally access to communication technology. And it's very important in the politics. It's directly to elaboration, for example, communication strategy, because every place in Uganda, in Georgia, Moldova, and inside in Georgia, it's absolutely different. Yes, and during the pandemic period, I also live in the villages, and sometimes I often use the radio than internet, because sometimes when I have light and I need information, I switch radio and I use old radio, and my husband make old radio. It's old radio, yes, and because it's very specific issues, it's very important to have a communication strategy. One side, and other side, COVID pandemic has shown us that it is important to have gender-sensitive rapid response plan at the municipality level. Yes, and I think reproductive health and reproductive issues also should part of gender-sensitive rapid response plan at the municipality level. And we know this issue have many challenges, and some days ago was very interesting site even concerned generation dialogue. This is also important, this issue, and my colleagues talk about reproductive health. And for example, one side we talk so much about the reproductive health, but the other side, when we talk about reproductive health in the education program, including and mainstream many topics, but not include the word of gender. Yes, and because I think it's very important to include topic of reproductive health of education system more actively, one side, and the other side, the role of municipality is so big. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Elena. Valentina, I'll go straight to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Agnieszka. I think, first of all, in Moldova, we need to establish very strong dialogue between all actors, including parliament, central authority, local authority, civil society organization from different fields. It's the first. Secondly, it's very important to mainstream gender into all recovering action. And also gender budgeting is crucial, because we discuss a lot about women's peace and security agenda implementation, but without money, without resources. The most actions are implemented by NGOs. And we have a colleague from governmental level who are very active, but there are no money. There are no budgeting focused on these issues. It's very important. Also, it is crucial for us, and I would like to address special thanks, but special idea addressed to our development partner. Please continuously support our effort and cooperation between both bank of Dnistru River, from Transnistrian region, Gagauzia, and of course from all part of Moldova, because it's very important to be connected, to be gender sensitive, and to address all gender needs of our population in all action plans. And of course, it's important to develop services addressed to different marginalized groups. Because every time I'm sorry, we don't have money because all our forces are focused only on COVID in general. But it's not excuse to forget about other issues. Sexual reproductive health should be included as cross-cutting on all our programs in connection with women, peace and security agenda. And I think for the next step, we, as representing civil society, will advocate to include a new action plan in Moldova, sexual reproductive health and rights, and of course, human security concept and other issues connected with gender-based violence and gender equality. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Valentina. Goretti?
Thank you, Agnieszka. My colleagues have already spoken about all these issues, but in building back better on the issue of localization, for example, in Uganda, we have 146 districts, and out of those, COACT and Center for Women Governance have facilitated only 10 districts. So you can see it's still an uphill task, and where we have not gone to localize 1325, the leaders, all the stakeholders are very green about the agenda. So they need to scale up and adopt localization, cannot be overemphasized. I would say that as advocates for human rights and the WPS, we need to advocate for the special courts for GBV. We had it before COVID-19, but in Uganda, but now I think we need to reawaken our activism on this, because cases are very many, but the rate at which they're being heard is very disappointing. So I would really recommend that we need to have the special courts sit and hear GBV cases specifically, since the pandemic has really worsened this problem. I would like also to mention that we need to hold the governments accountable regarding the funds that we received to address issues of women, peace and security, yeah, and curbing of the pandemic. For us in Uganda, the many donors give money to address the pandemic, but how it is used, you will never know. There's no accountability. I don't know whether it is the same with other participating districts. And of course, as Mafiki said, the flexible funding for us women organizations to address and implement gender-sensitive COVID-19 relief and recovery. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Goretti, and thank you once again to our three formidable speakers. We've heard the need to amplify localization, work with local municipalities, the need to hold governments accountable to their commitment and the way that funding around COVID-19 response and recovery is spent in consultation with women, civil society. We've heard also the importance of accountability for perpetrators of sexual violence, sexual and gender-based violence. We heard the need for education, sexual education in schools, and education on gender equality, as well as, of course, stronger coordination as well across sectors and across departments for the implementation of women, peace and security and gender responsive and conflict sensitive recovery. Thank you for this rich discussion, and thank you once again to our co-organizers. From my side, I really thank you for being with us and for contributing to this discussion also in the chat and the Q&A. And because I know we are a few minutes over time, I'll pass it straight away to Mavic to close us off. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Agnieszka. Can you hear me? Oh.
Yes, we hear you loud and clear.
Sorry. Thank you. We all know that the COVID-19 pandemic is a conflict multiplier, but it also has its silver lining. It gives us an opportunity to strengthen our connectedness, to revisit our priorities, and to implement the women, peace, and security, as well as the youth, peace, and security agendas in a more intersectional, integrative, and inclusive approaches. I want to emphasize once again that this is a unique time in our history. A bolder vision, long-term transformative strategies are needed more than ever. Conflict prevention, mediation, conflict resolution should not be defunded nor deprioritized. The consequences of not putting it on top of our agenda are beyond our imagination. They will be beyond a global nightmare. So thank you once again for sharing the vision for not only building back better, but building back equal. We thank again the Austrian Development Cooperation, the permanent missions of Austria, Georgia, and Moldova, our amazing panelists, and all of you, dear audience, for your enthusiastic participation. Stay safe and healthy, everyone. This meeting